Hi folks, I'd like to tell you a little bit about this video. I plan on probably making a series of videos that will discuss my process of buying a Haas mini mill, and it'll cover a bit on ordering it and having it delivered, and then probably learning how to operate it, and you might throw in a little bit about Fusion 360 and stuff like that. So this is for somebody who has an interest in that but doesn't have any knowledge of what it is, because this is from the dead-ass, point-blank novice point of view. And if that's not you, if you already have a mini mill, if you have no interest in CAD or buying any kind of mill, you probably won't enjoy this video. So I would suggest you turn it off now. Spend your time doing something more pleasurable. So the video is going to cover my process. And again, a little perspective. I really hate YouTube videos where a 6-minute video, somebody comes out and spends the first 2 minutes talking about themselves, or the first 3 minutes, sometimes 4 minutes, talking about themselves before they finally give any information. Well, this video is going to be about me, what I have done, why I did it, so you understand where I'm coming from. Because I want to explain my learning process, some of the things that I found useful, and maybe even more importantly is the missteps I took and why I did it. So if you hear from me something that I did in a certain way and you understand that that's not the way you would do it, you have a better way, fine. That is great. And I probably have an ulterior motive. I would like to get some other feedback and YouTube videos on my process to improve it. Like I say, I am really a novice when it comes to CNC. So to talk about me so you understand where I'm coming from, I never was a machinist. I took metal shop in high school. I was a maintenance mechanic. I was taught how to repair radar back in 1966, and things have changed there. Then I kind of like to fool around with knife making. So me and computers have never been that good. I mean, the old joke where I have to find a 12-year-old to explain to me how to use my phone is the truth. But I've been struggling with that, and I've been finding it's very hard at first, but like anything else, you start applying yourself and it starts to become more clear. So it might be of interest to you to know why I would even want the machine. I don't plan on making knives in any production sense or really anything else. I always was interested in CNC. I'm fascinated by the fact that you can conceive of something in your mind and then basically put it on paper, the computer screen, and then take that information, put it in the machine, and then poof, you've got something in your hand. So like it's from your mind to this sort of magical process, and then you've got something holding in your hand that you conceived mentally. And I haven't had much practical use for that until recently. After writing a couple books on knife mechanisms, I've got interested in it, and I have some ideas on making some mechanisms of my own, and I believe I do have a patent approval for a knife mechanism now. It's just something kind of very basic, trying to avoid the use of the word dumb, but something that is kind of neat in a way. And I just really mostly wanted to learn the patent process because I did the whole thing myself. And I'll probably make some videos on that for people who are interested in prosecuting their own patent, or at least getting the basics down so they could work better with a patent attorney. So I wanted to be able to take some concepts I have and create a prototype and see how that works. And to make a long story long, I think it's fascinating that although you might have to spend a whole day programming some part, or maybe even weeks programming some part, that you could do a redo of this part. You just decide that you want this hole to be a 1/16 of an inch further to the right. Well, you don't have to redesign your whole part. You could just go in and change that one little aspect. Because I do have a large vertical mill, and if I were to make some part the way I make it, it would probably take many hours. So after say 4 to 6 hours on the milling machine with 30 different operations, if I wanted to now move a hole a 1/16 over, I would have to redo 6 hours on the mill and move that part. Or I see just a simple little alteration can change the whole outcome. So that's kind of the thing I wanted. So the dilemma I found is seems to be like very little information. It seems like a lot of guys who have had some success with their vertical CNC mills have been working in the industry. They already were working in a machine shop, and they decided to go on their own, or they took some courses on it, I guess, in high school or whatever. And the guys who started out like me, well, everything was kind of old hat to them. So YouTube has been very helpful in that regard, but far from covering all the questions I had. Before I go into something, I'd like to know as much as I can to make sure it's a success. I don't try and do a big operation and expect to fail at it. And if you do perceive that something could go wrong, you're always going to have a backup plan. You switch to plan A, B, C, and the job eventually gets accomplished. So I think the first thing would be, if you're going to buy a mill, which one do you buy? And really, a $100,000 mill or even a $50,000 mill was not in my budget, not my plan. These are bona fide production machines. They're no-nonsense machines. And on the other end of the spectrum, they've got little CNC upright, I guess they call them engraving machines, but they're vertical mills for like $150. So $150, I mean, that's nothing. But it seemed like, even then, you got to know what you're doing. You got to know CAD, and they talk about Arduino and all that. I don't want to learn a whole bunch of stuff. If I could do it a more simplistic way and still achieve my goal. So I look around, and now they've got these carvers that use a router motor. And they're pretty good for cutting wood. But again, it didn't seem like they were that easy to program. And to prototype a knife mechanism, you've got to be able to probably at least cut aluminum. You don't necessarily want to cut it out of soft plastic or something like that. So more and more I started looking at a mill. Well, they got used mills out there. So the logical thing was, look, since I'm not going to go into production, I'm not going to run this thing 8 hours a day, 5 days a week or more, and continuously knock out part after part. I don't need a fancy mill or a new mill. But the problem I found was looking on eBay and some of the websites for resellers. The prices were astronomical. For instance, for a Haas mini mill that costs somewhere in the neighborhood of $25,000 new, these guys are asking $20,000 for a machine that was 10 years old. Sometimes they'd be asking $15,000 for a machine that was 20 years old. And I could just see how many times this thing has been run, and all the improvements over the years that this class of machine has missed out on. And I look more and more, I talk to these guys, and I never really got into negotiating with them. Like come on, well, what did you guys pay for the thing? $5,000? Now you turn around, you want $25,000? I'm a negotiator and stuff like that, but it just turned me off. I couldn't find anything used. So my first advice for anybody who wants to get in on this thing cheap, look around, shop the market, and maybe talk to some of these salesmen. They'd be glad to sell you a machine, but I don't know how much, they're adding on top. I see that, there's a variety of machines that they have Haas. Now, it's kind of interesting that when I would Google Haas, a lot of times this machine would come up, and the first ad you'd see would be for a Sharp. And I guess they had it triggered that way. So I'd be looking at these Sharp machines, and I don't know if they're so much bigger or better, but they were in the ballpark of what a Haas mini mill is. So it could be that they're bigger, sturdier machines, more prone to industrial work. But again, a novice, I didn't know. And the more you research these mills, the more and more you hear good things about Haas. And when you hear about different machines, Doosan or whatever, Yamaha, I don't know, there's not much information. Somebody says, well, I own this one and I love it, and another guy says, well, I own that one, I love it, but there's not a lot of information out there. It seems like there's more you can learn about Haas. So, well, if you are looking around for a mill, you find out there's a bunch of people who own Tormak. And Tormak, really impressive because they've got a lot of information out there. They've been in business a while. They seem to be very conscientious, and they've got training programs, which is, hey, training programs. I'm keenly interested in that. So I started looking into Tormak more and more. At one point, I was looking at the lowest price one, and it seemed really, really good. I think they had one for $5,000, and I said, man, that's in my budget. I could do that. And then they turn around and they upped it to $6,000. I don't know. I'm the type of person, stuff like that turns me off. Why they increase it another grand up to $6,000? So I don't know. They talk about servo motors and ball screws, and they talk about these features and stuff. I don't know. I'm trying to take it in. But then their next level was about $7,000. And I thought that was pretty good. Then the next one was about maybe 11 or 12,000. Well, I didn't need this big one for 11,000. I think this one for 7,000 just hit me dead on. I said, man, okay, that's what I'm going to buy. And then I hear other talk like, well, if you get this 11,000 one, by the time you put on this attachment and this addition and all, you're paying like 22,000 for this machine, whereas a mini mill you can get for 25,000. But is a mini mill that much better? Is a Haas mini mill that much better? I don't know. And even by the same token, if I get this one for 7,000, you really got to put on this add-on, that on, and you're going to end up somewhere in the neighborhood of 11,000. So I don't know. So I'm getting ready, and I'm getting ready to pull the trigger on a Tormak. And before I did, I called up this guy who's top-notch knife maker in the world. I don't want to name drop, but real friendly guy. And he had been talking to me a little bit about mills. We didn't have much time to talk. So I called him up and I said, look, I want to do some prototyping. I'm not going to do production. What do you think? I'm going to pull the trigger on this Tormak. And he goes, oh no, don't buy a Tormak. He said, we had a Tormak and we couldn't get the tolerances. Now that is a key word, the tolerances to reproduce. I didn't get into it. What I assume he meant was if he's cutting a part that is supposed to be, 20,000, the next time it comes around you get 18,000. Next time it comes around the next part you get 22,000. And he said he just couldn't get reproducibility. And I don't know, I said, okay, fine. I started really looking at the Haas, and so the Haas is what I went with. I said, look, there's this guy, he used to do these Knife Maker Tuesdays or something, and he just loved. He had this beat up Grizzly. Then he got that Tormak, and man, he was just cranking out crap. And he says, yeah, well, ask him what he's using now. I don't know. He probably still uses Tormak, but I saw one of his videos. He's kind of in production now. It's not just a hobby anymore. And he's got this humongous mill now. It looks like it's from Japan. I forget. Now you could look that up. But I went ahead and decided to get the Haas. And that was another YouTube where this guy, a very jovial guy, who got his got a Tormak, and he was cutting big parts on it. I think he had the smaller, not the baby Tormak, but the next one up, the $7,000 one, I think. And he's cutting this big hunk of steel, and like you could hear the thing sort of chattering every time it got to the X travel, I guess, and not so much of the Y. So it would seem like it had a certain weakness or something like that, and he wasn't getting, reproducibility. His tolerances were out, and he talked about all the problem he had taking the thing back, and then he finally bought a Haas super mini mill, I believe. But the interesting thing is, if you go down, there's like 80 comments, and people were just sort of backing up what he was saying, like, yeah, you don't get the tolerances with the Tormak, whatever. So besides all that, to be honest with you, I'm kind of sorry I didn't buy a Tormak, because it would have been a lot cheaper, and I just don't need a whole lot of tolerance on cutting steel parts. I would probably have gone just fine with prototyping things out of aluminum. So please keep that in mind. But the Haas supposedly had training, and it was geared up, and there was a bunch of YouTube videos on how to use the Haas. And I hope you guys who know how to use a Haas mini mill or any sort of Haas mill could crank out a few more videos, because I tell you what, most of them suck. Okay? The audio may be bad, the teaching is bad. Now, Haas puts out its own videos called Tip of the Day. And for the most part, they're just excellent. A lot of times they leave a little thing out that a real newbie has problems with. But again, if you watch the video 3 or 4 times and you watch another video, and things start to fill in. So I really have to commend Haas for those videos on how to set up the location of the part and things like that. And the dilemma too is there's so much to learn. I mean, the first time you look at a Haas keyboard, it'll drive you nuts. But like anything else, you start working with it a while, after a while it starts to make sense. But when you get into CAM and all that other stuff, man, I tell you, it's just overwhelming. So for that reason, I have a fear that I'll never get around to really getting the full potential out of this machine. So I would say, in closing, kind of do some shopping. Now you know what I went through, why I picked a Haas. They're they have a very good reputation. I understand a mini mill is not going to do the same thing as a huge vertical mill. They have a very rigid frame, but they're not as rigid as some of these bigger machines. Some of the other machines, they use the same computer system, but there are different upgrades to it. So I'd like to talk some more about what I did and how I got the thing delivered and stuff like that. Please put some comments down that you could be helpful to all of us. I certainly am trying to help people, and I'm interested in learning as well. So I'll end it there for now. Thanks a lot.